Greetings and salutation. And it is said in the great book of the future, verily, 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 I say unto you, smart technology is making us stupid. Hmm. Thou who hast ears to hear, let them hear. Today I want to talk about SDG 11 and SDG 12 on this Global Goals Day 8 of Global Goals Week. And I am going to race on and make sure I do my duty, which was to complete 10 days straight of talking about my passion, the Global Development Goals. So, smart technology is making us stupid. Why do I start there? Because, of course, my gospel is about smart futures. Goal number 11 talks about sustainable cities and communities. And goal number 12 talks about responsible consumption and production. And when we think about the number of people living in cities, this becomes a very important goal if we're talking about moving towards a flourishing future for all. Now, the main structure of Goal 11 is this: let's make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. All words that are critically important for the smart futures that I'm talking about. Now, SDG 12 is about, as I said, responsible consumption and production, but we'll come to that later. Let's take a deeper look at SDG 11. So we want to have sustainable and affordable transport system, inclusive and sustainable urbanization. We have to protect, of course, our cultural and national heritage. I mean, natural heritage, the great cities with great buildings and the things that kind of make a city a city. Then we want, of course, reduce the adverse effects of natural disasters. We know how that is. So many natural disasters across the world, from flooding to volcanoes to forest fires. Everywhere you go, nobody is immune. We want to also reduce the environmental impact of cities. A lot of cities are very much waste producers, air quality and waste management problems. We want inclusive and safe green and public spaces, especially for people who are disabled, for older persons, for children. Basically, we want to have, in this case, it ties to SDG 16, peace and justice and less crime. And of course, all of this requires a strong regional and national and local planning and good policies that are talking about promoting resource efficiency and likewise. Finally, we want to make sure that least developed countries are supported in building sustainable and resilient cities, because clearly we don't want them to make the mistakes of the past and continue to create the havoc that we have created so far. So that's for SDG 11. Now SDG 12, very quickly, targets for responsible consumption and production. Well, we talked a little bit about this idea of waste yesterday, but just to talk about food waste, that's critical. A lot of food is thrown out. Actually, coming up soon in September is Food Waste Day. Then management of chemicals and waste, and then sustainability issues. How are we going to get people thinking about sustainability? How do we get companies, big and small, everybody thinking about the practices, day-to-day practices, procurement practices, and how do we get people to actually want to lead sustainable lifestyles? That's a huge one. And most important for me is the idea, two things for small island developing states, is two things what goals are about: implementing and monitoring sustainable tourism. Critically, we need that in the Caribbean and other islands of the Pacific that benefit from tourism and demand and depend on tourism. Most important for me as an engineer is ensuring we support developing countries' scientific and technological capacity for sustainable consumption and production. And there is a role. We need what I'm calling science and research development equity, R&D development equity. We need a Magna Carta, basically, that is changing this. And to some extent, this is what I've been trying to do in my book, Smart Futures, is to create a sort of Magna Carta, 5 smart questions that we ask about the future that help us to build a smarter society, so that we don't indeed go to this notion that smart technology is making us stupid. So in that case, I have 2 seeds of hope. One is a global organization that's doing trying to do work to do global research projects, very much like what I talk about in my book. I talk about the Smart Futures Collaboratories, but their research projects are looking at interactions of humans and Earth systems, right? And so this seed of hope is Future Earth. Give them a shout out. This is important because when you think about it, right? The world's largest cities, 100 largest cities, represent 70% of the world GDP and 974 million inhabitants. That's more than a fifth of the global urban population. That's just the 100 top largest cities. And Tokyo for right now is the largest with 37.4 million people. That's a lot of people in one place. Of course, Mexico, Lagos, New York City. I mean, really, by 2030, the mega cities are going to be of the range of 15 million and above. This is huge. So why Future Earth? Because they're building and mobilizing networks of people, they're facilitating research and innovation, and more importantly, they're trying to shape the narrative. I have to say this is kind of why I gave them the edge, even though I think they could do a better job. But I'm going to give them the edge because at least they're trying. What I'd really like to see them do is democratize, if you will, the participation. Too many hoi polloi people. If we want to talk about a future Earth, then it can't just be the top echelons of society that are participating. Future Earth must indeed do what SDG 11 and 12 say, which is democratize access to the information they're pushing if they do in fact want to shape the narrative. I would like to see stories like the one I include about Nancy helping to make waste or make waste management better. Stories that involve children from South Africa, children from India, because quite frankly, India is doing a fantastic job. Small NGOs in India are doing a fantastic job in coming up with ideas, but nobody is listening. Now, mind you, India by itself has 1 billion people, so they alone, everything about those big cities, they just have to listen to each other. If they themselves could listen to each other and demonstrate to us what's happening, then perhaps the story we read in Ministry for the Future, which actually has a story in India. If you haven't read that book, please get it. Kim Stanley Robinson, Ministry for the Future. I love it. We should indeed have a Ministry for the Future. His book really talks about how this might shape out. And indeed, I was excited to have a conversation with him. And he actually also has done a review on my book because we think so much alike. I'm so excited. I actually think like Kim Stanley Robinson. But brilliant genius that he is, I think India is really a place we need to look to for more leadership, thought leadership on what we might do. Let me just say before I go to India, Future Earth has free membership, so anybody can join this network of innovative researchers. And I think maybe it's up to us, those of us who want to push the change, to push for that. Now, finally and quickly, let me just point you to a website called Eco Ideas Ventures coming out of India. And one of their pages lists a whole bunch of really great innovations that are happening in India, from converting recycled medical waste into bricks, to geopolymer concrete, which is green, to ethanol from agro waste, to an IoT-based beehive, supercapacitors for energy storage, you name it, low-tech terracotta air conditioner. A lot of young, bright people in India are coming with very innovative ideas. What I would like to see is much more funding put into identifying these young innovators and really building out this sort of a Smart Futures collaboratory that my book Smart Futures talks to. So, friends, that it is, you have two seeds of hope, Future Earth and Eco Ideas out of India. Visit those websites. They are doing great work in keeping us informed. And I'd like to end by just giving two shout outs to two authors who have been talking about smart cities. A smart city is an intelligent town that provides enormous possibilities for human growth through art, culture, social, architectural, economic, political, environment, and scientific flowering with the optimal mix of nature, technology, humanity, and the arts. So says Amit Ray, who writes the book Peace, Bliss, Beauty, and Truth, Living with Positivity. And finally, last but not least, a word from Ogwo David Emenike. Smart indeed is not a word, it's an attitude. And that's why I'm pushing Smart Futures for All. Ubuntu. Until next time.